Okay, if you are seeing this, it means that 10,000 of us now, which is insane. Thank you for watching, for subscribing, for sharing, for playing along with my jokes in the comments. That means the world to me. So we're going to do a little Q&A. I asked people for questions on Instagram, on a YouTube community post, and through my email list, which if you're not subscribed to, go on. There's some really interesting questions. Hopefully I'm going to get through them all. So buckle in, grab a cup of tea. And just quickly, before we get started, I wanted to ask you guys a question. My channel is always going to be about photography and photography equipment and cameras. And a big part of what I've been learning lately is cinematography. I've been making videos for YouTube, testing my skills out, and I've been lucky enough to get sent some pretty cool gear that I've been, experimenting with. So my question is, if I launched a series where I learn cinematography as somebody that knows photography very well, but's quite new to cine, would you be interested in seeing that? Let me know. Let's get into some questions. I'm gonna start with the ones from email list subscribers because they're my favorite. Joseph, hi Joseph. Joseph would like to know how I go about composition and what tips I recommend. And that's a great question. The answer is I've literally scripted an entire video about composition that's going to be coming out in the next couple of weeks. So keep your eyes peeled, click the bell, and all of that good stuff. I'm pretty excited about it. Hi, Anne. Anne would like to know how to keep yourself motivated when social media doesn't really give back. If you've subscribed recently, you might not have seen a video I made called Video Poems, where I kind of talk about how social media is incentivizing the wrong things and it's kind of detracting from the original reason that we create in the first place. If you haven't seen it, I highly encourage checking it out because realistically, likes on social media are not a metric of how good something is. I just think it's distracting from the whole reason that we started creating in the first place, right? Which is because we love to. Jakub, or Jacob, depending on whether or not you would like me to pronounce your name in the most Polish way possible, would like to know if he sucks at color film or if black and white is just more his style. Now, you mentioned that when you scan color, that it doesn't really give you that wow effect that you're looking for, that pop. And I think when we talk about pop and wow, most of the time we're talking about contrast. Black and white is black and white, so inherently it's really contrasty a lot of the time, especially when labs scan it, they tend to boost the contrast a little bit. Whereas with color, especially if you get it lab scanned, labs tend to give you a bit more of that flatter look so that you've got more room to adjust in post. I think don't give up on color just yet. Give it a crack. Get some scans like in TIFF format from the lab and just crank up the contrast on them. I think you'll enjoy that more. Also, if you're shooting film and you want contrasty color, try Ektar. Hi Justine. Justine's cool. You guys should check out her channel. I've put a thing and a link. Justine would like to know what hobbyist photographers do for work and how the financing side of things work. This is a really common question, and it's a question that everyone kind of has because, again, with social media, our view of what's normal has been super skewed. The reality is, most people who do this have a full-time job. Up until fairly recently, I was a cameraman and editor for a marketing agency, which taught me a lot, but ultimately doing tripod talking head corporate stuff is really fucking boring. Before that, when I was, fully in the street photography thing, mostly pre-YouTube, I was working in digital marketing and project management for e-commerce startups. And before that, I've done so many different jobs. I used to fix iPhones. I worked at a bowling alley. I was a mechanic for a little bit. Only recently have I decided to go all in on being a full-time creative. But I think it's important to recognize most people can't do that. Most of the people that you see in their 20s who are doing this full-time are either exceptionally good and or have support from a partner or the bank of mum and dad. And that's just the unfortunate reality of the creative industries. And I come from a working class background and I definitely don't have, checks from mummy and daddy coming in to buy cinema lenses. So for me, the only way that I've been able to make this work is by having an enormous and rather silly risk appetite when it comes to finances. Personally, I think if you just want to do this as a hobby and you have a job that is fine, that's great. If you hate your job and you feel like you literally cannot do anything other than create, be patient. I've talked to so many professional commercial photographers, videographers, like art directors, and everyone says the same thing. You have to grind it out and eat rice and beans for 10 years. I'm about halfway through that, and let me tell you, I'm still eating rice and beans on a regular basis. Tom would like some advice on travel lenses for his Nikon D750. Good choice. What have you got at the moment, Tom? You've got a 51.8 and a 70-210 f5.6. That's a pretty good combo. I think when you're traveling, the best way to go about it is just to pack as light as you possibly can, because like when you're traveling, you don't want to be thinking about which lens to switch to, or you know, like, oh, do I want my 35-1.4 or my 50-1.4? Like, you want to be focusing on the amazing experiences that you're having. And so when it comes to travel, I reckon go light if you can. Maybe try like a 24-105, like f4. So that way you just like never swap the lens. If you want to get a bit more artsy and have more bokeh stuff, maybe you could have that and the 50. Based on where Tom says he's going, I would assume it's not going to be the sort of like wildlife, birds and rhinos type photography. So I think a 24-105 will cover pretty much everything you'd need. I know that 24-105 f4 is like not a pro lens, but realistically, if it gets the job done, who cares if it's a pro lens? Okay, let's do some questions from Instagram. If you don't follow me on Instagram, hi Tam. If you guys aren't watching Tam's videos, you should go bug her, tell her I sent you. She's a lot better at YouTube than I am, a lot more talented than I am. Tam would like to know if I have a favorite city for photography. Yes, London. There's something special about London. It just has so much density and it's got so much aesthetic range. It's got Brixton, and then it's also got like Kensington and Chelsea, and the people are like, you can go on one tube carriage and see a punk, a dude wearing a bowler hat unironically, and a poodle, and it's just, all of it is just there. It's so vibrant and energetic. Aviator Ryan, what do you look for when looking for locations in street photography? That's a good question. Mostly two things. Foot traffic, there's got to be enough of it, and light. Light is important, especially if you're shooting film. In European cities, this can be a bit fiddly because the buildings tend to be quite tall, and so you kind of get like a morning where it's full sun and then an afternoon where it's full shade. Planning around when you're going to be there and what the light is going to be like, and figuring out where to position yourself in that light is pretty important. In your opinion, what is the best film to shoot on Pentax K1000? A lot of people ask me about my favorite film stocks. Unfortunately, my favorite film stock is hard, if not impossible to find, which is Fujifilm Superior 400. You might be surprised to hear that. It's generally not considered like a particularly good film, but I really like it. I like that the colors are punchy. I like it's got great contrast. I like that it has weirdly fine grain compared to Ultramax, at least in my experience. And I like the way that the highlights look. The film that I shoot the most, there's two. Color, Kodak Gold. It's cheap and it looks great. Black and white is actually Tri-X. I used to shoot HP5 like every day, all day. Like I've shot probably 500 rolls of HP5 over the last couple of years, but I've recently found that when I shoot black and white, I like a little bit more grit. I like a little bit more contrast. Tri-X has been giving me that lately. Best free light meter app. I don't use a light meter app, so I'm not sure. I've had mixed results with the ones that I have used. Most of my cameras have a light meter built in, but if I don't have a light meter, I generally just meter by eye. You'd be shocked at how far Sunny 16 can get you, and once you start to practice it and get used to it, you'll turn into some sort of weirdo like me where I can meter by eye in just about any situation. If you're doing something critical that you do need a light meter for, like maybe large format photography or client work, find a rental house or a film lab that will rent or lend you a light meter. Proper professional like Sekonic or Pentax light meter are kind of unbeatable. Hi Sam. Sam would like to know what my biggest fear is. Coronation Street, Comic Sans. Okay, but really, I think my biggest fear is probably not producing work, whether that's art or YouTube videos or anything that I make, that's not up to the standard that I set for myself when I started the project. You'd be shocked at how many times I've reshot YouTube videos just because I wasn't quite happy with them. Tucker Photography asks, favorite photo books / projects, cornerstone, motivational, inspirational stuff that I come back to on a very regular basis. All That Life Can Afford by Matt Stewart, Sleeping on the Mississippi by Alex Soth. I really like Jesse Marlowe's Don't Just Tell Them, Show Them. Do the 303 Dance says, I don't have a question to ask, I just wanted to say your YouTube channel is wonderful and photos. Thank you. Correct says, how do you find the right exposure when there's a really bright sky? If the sky's really bright, let it be really bright. I think people are really afraid of clipping the highlights, which is fair enough, but sometimes you just kind of have to let them go. If you end up having the sky like mess with your light meter, one thing that I do is I'll look through the camera at my hand and I'll meter off of my hand because it's gonna give me sort of a general skin tone-ish type of thing. This random, it's my girlfriend, says, are you ashamed of Poland? No, I love Poland. I moved here about 8 months ago. I'm loving it. The food's amazing. The city is amazing. Warsaw is so functional. The public transport's awesome. People have been very kind to me so far. And the language is, it's definitely one of the languages. Do you ever feel guilty about spending a lot of time on a project that won't be the best buck? No. There's a couple of reasons for this. A, if money is a priority for you, this is the wrong line of work. Second of all, the profits that you make from a project are not tied directly to that project. What I mean by that is doing personal projects, stuff for friends for free. It can be a pain, sure, but in reality, that's the work that's going to get you the higher paying jobs. You don't get opportunities to shoot 4 or 5 figure campaigns for international offshore finance companies, for example, if you don't do a whole bunch of work for free first. And now, let's have a look at some of the YouTube community questions. A lot of these are great questions, but one question that comes up constantly all the time is what gear do I use? So I want to quickly run you through that. For stills, I use a Nikon D750 with the vertical grip and mostly Sigma Art primes. I also have the Nikkor 85mm, which I basically never use. I also have the Nikon 16mm fisheye, which I use slightly more than the 85 because I actually like it. For film, I shoot on a Pentax K1000 SE pretty much exclusively. I have had loads of other cameras in the past. I had an RB67, I've had a Minolta Maxim 5, I had an Olympus 35, the little one. Ultimately, chopping and changing cameras is fun, but this works for me. I made a video about why it's so great. Would I like to also have, you know, like a Nikon F3 HP? Yeah, I would, but it's hard to justify that investment when it does the same thing as this. For video stuff, I use the Sony FX30. You're watching me on it right now with the Sigma 18 to 35 1.8 on the Sigma adapter. I have an ND filter on there made by Nisi and the Cinebloom 10%. I'm using Rode Wireless Pro microphones clipped to an exclusive limited edition wooden spoon that none of you can have. And I'm lit with a Zhiyun 500 watt COB light bouncing off the ceiling and a Mollis X60 with a softbox there. The only gear on that list that I didn't personally pay for is the Moment Cinebloom filter, which they sent me because I asked nicely. If you didn't know, I sometimes write articles for the Moment blog, and all of the Zhiyun lights have been provided to me by Zhiyun. They said, if you like it, make a video. If you don't like it, whatever. But honestly, Zhiyun have been a pretty cool company to be friends with. They're very open to my feedback. They just ask me if I want to try stuff when new stuff comes out. And it's really cool that they're supporting a channel as small as this one. Of course, I will have affiliate links for literally everything I own in the description. So if there's any gear that you are interested in looking at and learning about, it's down there. And on that note, how should I resist an urge and constantly looking for and buying cameras, lenses, and all the accessories, especially when there's moments like gears do matter? Here's the thing, gear does matter, but not having the perfect gear is not an excuse not to be making stuff. Before I had the FX30, I shot all of my YouTube videos on the Nikon. Yes, it matters, but it matters less than you think. If you want to make great videos, you can do that on the Nikon D750. If you want to make great videos, you can do that on your phone, even if it's a Galaxy S6. I think instead of getting shiny object syndrome, it's better to make as much stuff as you can with the gear that you have. And then when you run into a wall where you go, I can't do this thing that I need to do for the story because I don't have the right gear, that's when you can let yourself buy something. Do you think it's the camera or the photographer's eyes that make the difference? It's the photographer's eyes for sure. There are many, many, many people with extremely expensive cameras that have never taken a good photo. And there are many, many, many people who have taken beautiful, amazing photos on an iPhone 6. Bob says, why would I move to or use film if my digital camera has so many advanced features that film cameras don't? That's a good question, because it's more fun. He also asks, do you think a Leica is worth it? I think Leicas are worth it if you're buying it because you want a beautiful camera that is in itself a work of art. If you're buying it to try and make your photos better, It's not gonna work. My SD card ran out. That's never happened before. Is photography subjective? Of course. Just because you've got a friend that hates your photos and you hate his photos doesn't make either of you a bad photographer. I've got a friend called Carl. He's based in Jersey. He's a professional photographer and he shoots very clean, crispy 85mm Canon sort of styled stuff. And it's great. His clients are happy. He's making money off of it. He's happy with his work. It's not my cup of tea. On the flip side, he really doesn't like my Crooked Horizons, wacky, stuff out of focus street photography style. Neither of us are bad photographers. We just have different approaches. And actually, when we've shot stuff together, it's been really eye-opening about what we can learn from each other to improve our own style. How often should one take pictures so that self-development works off financially? I think we're talking about developing your own film. I can't speak to color because developing that is a bit of a pain. The chemistry doesn't last very long. In terms of black and white, yeah, it's definitely worth it. If you shoot like pretty much ever, black and white's worth it. Black and white chemistry, especially if you're developing with something like HC110, lasts ages. Also the convenience, like being able to just get home from a day of taking photos and then just immediately develop all of your stuff, hang it out to dry, have dinner, scan it. By the end of the day, you have the photos. It's very good. Have you ever tried photographing large mountains? Every time I try it, they look tiny and don't dominate the space. That is slightly outside of my wheelhouse, but you will be surprised to hear that yes, I have. As a photographic compulsive, I have photographed literally everything I've ever seen, including mountains. I think the thing with mountains is you need to give it some sort of point of reference. Nothing looks big unless there's something little. Otherwise, everything's just the same size. That's where that whole like banana for scale meme comes from. Also, obviously try to fill the frame. I think with mountains, if you've just got like them in the little background mountains, then it doesn't really work. That doesn't mean that you need to go and shoot a 200mm to compress the background. I shot these on 50. Putting something man-made in the foreground, like a little hut or a car or a fence or a person, gives the mountain that sense of scale and it gives us a point of reference to compare things to. This is a really good compositional trick in general, and James Popsis made a great video about it called Forget the Rule of Thirds, Do This Instead. I'll link it below. I think you should check it out. Ivory Johnson also asks, how can you use photography to truly capture the essence of a favorite moment? Like, what are some tips for what to do to make the photo do justice to the experience? I think, you know, when you're hanging out with your friends on the beach and you take a photo, but it just looks like it could be a calendar that you buy from Walmart. I think the trick to making it feel a bit more immersive and a bit more like a memory is to get a bit more artsy-fartsy with it. And what I mean by that is don't just like take a perfectly exposed HDR banger of the sunset. I mean, you can do that if you want, but shooting maybe a wider angle lens and having some out of focus elements in the foreground, maybe try slow shutter to convey the feeling that you're feeling and not just what you're seeing. Can you truly express yourself through photography? All other art forms begin with an empty page. Photography is the only art form the canvas is already full. The photographer can only choose a frame. Of course, you can absolutely express yourself completely through photography. You can express yourself completely through art, but there are only so many different shapes a canvas can be and only so many different colors. You can express yourself completely through music, but there's a limited number of notes and a limited number of orders you can put them in. One photo doesn't have to say the entire world about who you are as a person and the depths of the universe. We're not trying to do like phenomenology of the spirit as a singular photo, but you can express a specific feeling. Phil T UK says, will you keep the spoon or are any other kitchen utensils planned? I think I'll keep the spoon for now. What do you think about covering the lens with some kind of material to get funky effects? I like it. I think that you should do it even if you think it's dumb for reasons I described in this video, or that I'll link it. Juan says, how do you carry your camera when doing street? Small bag, big bag, neck strap, wrist strap, what? Generally speaking, don't like to have a bag because it's a pain to carry a bag. All of my cameras have Peak Design anchors and I use this nice green Peak Design, whatever the hell this one is. There's a few reasons that I like it. A, it's green. B, it's made out of like seatbelt material and it's quite wide, which means that it doesn't hurt when I carry around a big, silly, heavy camera like this all day. It's super durable. I've never had any trouble with it. It's quick to take on and off. It's adjustable. There's a link for this below. Did you ever do different kinds of photography or did you do street photography from the start? When I started, I didn't know that it was called street photography. I just knew that I really needed to take pictures, otherwise my head would explode. And so I just left the house and started taking pictures. But yeah, I've shot loads of stuff, not just street. I've shot cars, I've shot motorsport, I've shot protests, festivals, concerts, raves. Basically, my selling point and my specialty is anything involving chaos. I'm your guy. What got me into photography is a great question. When I bought this camera, I was a teenager and my passion up until that point had been cars. I love fixing cars, I love working on cars, driving cars until I broke them. And when I decided to move to the UK and realized I was gonna have to sell my cars, I realized I need something mechanical to keep me occupied. And so I found this on eBay for probably like pocket change back then, tested out. I shot a roll of like Color Plus or something, and then my life permanently changed and I was addicted forever. What are some mental and physical things you do before and after every photo shoot? Hydrate, comfy shoes, make sure you've eaten, be in a good mood. What's your favorite pic that you've taken and or from someone else? This is one of my favorite pictures, and this is also one of my favorite pictures I've ever taken. And this one is very special to me, but it's maybe not the best photo I've ever taken. My favorite photos that other people have taken are this one, and this one. Who are some photographers who you look to for inspiration? Alex Soth, Matt Stewart, Trent Park, Mary Ellen Mark, Jill Friedman's work is really cool, Helen Levitt, William Klein. I really like the work of Sally Mann. How do you nail colors in post? A lot of time and a lot of practice. Try not to just use presets. Try to actually go through Lightroom and learn what every single slider does. I know it takes time, but once you've figured out what everything does, it'll allow you to decide how you want things to look with a lot more accuracy. How do you find the right style for your photography? I think style is something that people get a little bit wrong. Style is not one thing that you discover and then it clicks and you're like, aha, this is my style now. Your visual style, the way you frame, the way you choose colors, that is free to change, like ongoing for the rest of your life. Your point of view, I think you should work at revealing more in your photography. Show more of yourself in the photos you take. I Have Alchemy asks, what is the best lens you've ever used and why? If you know me at all, you're expecting me to say 28, but it is, in fact, not a 28. It is this one, the Sigma Art 50mm 1.4. It's reassuring. I know it doesn't matter what. I know I can get it on this lens. I know it's gonna nail focus every time. I know it's gonna be sharp. I know I can use it in the dark. And while I love 28 for street photography, 50 is probably the best focal length for any kind of work because it's so versatile. How old were you when you first got into photography? 16 or 17? What makes photographing for you so great? Is it your passion and will it be? Yes, photography is a way for me to tell stories. I think storytelling is the umbrella passion. If you could interview a photographer you've looked up to and ask them 3 questions, who would it be and why? I think it would be Garry Winogrand, and I would just ask him about how he sees. The thing that interests me and the thing that I like about Garry's work is that it doesn't feel like he went out trying to get like street photo bangers. I think he just went out because he was compelled by a force greater than himself to just go and see the world and absorb life that was going on and take photos of it. Oh, this is a good one. This is a good one. How did you learn the fundamentals and improve your photography skills? And what would you do differently if you had to start from scratch? There's 2 answers to this. First, I just failed a lot. I think the best way to learn is to be completely willing and okay with failing constantly for a couple of years. Read some books about photography and I watched a lot of YouTube about photography. In terms of what I would do differently, first, before I shot film, I would buy my course. But also, I think when you're new at any skill, it's very easy to compare yourself to people who have been doing it for 25 years. I would care less about labels and just focus on making photos that I like. How important is having a small camera and lens in street photography? Not at all. I've shot loads of candids on this. I've shot loads of candids on this with a 24 to 70 2.8. I've never had a problem with it. Sometimes having a small camera can make you look like you're trying to be sneaky. So sure, it works for some people. A lot of people swear by Leicas. If I could afford one, I might swear by one too. Is there a niche camera I actually like using? Yes. Polaroid Impulse AF. Focus on it. There you go. It's a Polaroid camera from the 80s. It shoots Polaroid 600 film. I've shot protests on that camera, believe it or not. And finally, favorite weird fruit or favorite camera mount? Favorite camera mount, come on guys, it's obvious. It's unfortunately, for all you haters out there, it's Nikon F mount. Name one other lens mount system that has the amount of lenses and versatility available than the Nikon F mount. Favorite weird fruit? Feel like I'm supposed to have a a camera joke lined up here, but I really thank you for hanging out with me and asking all those questions. So as always, thank you for watching. Stay hydrated and create art.